Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Proof Point Baking Association of Canada webinar series, where baking innovators share ideas and intelligence that's actually moving our industry forward. My name is Tricia Ryan, and I'm Director of Membership Development at the Baking Association. I want to thank you for participating today and sharing this. We had well over 125 people register, so obviously a hot topic. Before we dive in, a few housekeeping notes. The session will run from 4 till 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We do have access to French translation, and Reed is going to put up a UR code if you'd like to receive a copy. But you can also reach out to me, tryan@baking.ca, if you need this in French, and we will accommodate. And we do have some time in the session for questions and answers. And so feel free to put them in the Q&A box. And just a quick reminder that the Baking Association of Canada does exist to do just this kind of thing, connect members with fun intelligence, relationships, and tools so we are a stronger, better community. I'm going to turn this over very quickly to Martin Barnett, our Executive Director, for a few words on the association and GLP-1, because he's fired up about this subject.
Thanks, Tricia. Yes, I am fired up about this webinar, but I won't hold up the proceedings. I just want to welcome everybody. Thank you for attending. This is a very important part of being a member. If you're not a member, please consider joining us so that we can continue to present these opportunities. Reed and team, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. And GLP-1, what the data means for your business? Well, I'm looking forward to finding out, because there is a plethora of data and information out there, and we'd like to get a clearer picture on how it affects our baking sector and what we can do to meet the new demands.
So by way of introduction to our guests as well, as we all know, GLP-1 has been in the news now for a number of years. If there isn't a subject that it seems to cure, I know I've recently seen one on cancer as well as brain cell development and all sorts of different health reasons that it is good for you. And of course, we know many of the brand names, and some exciting things are happening to sort of push Canada ahead with some of the regulations, and Reed will be covering a bit of that. We know that this is a $3 billion plus industry. We also know it's impacting baked goods, pastries, cookies, snack items, and purchase studies are showing it's not just the user of the GLP-1 drug, it's those and their family members are being impacted by the decisions that they're making in their food. Just yesterday or the day before, I saw 2026 Mondelez State of Snacking report, and my LinkedIn post was about snacking is dead, with 44% of consumers now making a snack a meal here in Canada. And what we see is the way that they're approaching food with snacks replace meals. They're part of fuel performance, delivery of comfort, building social currency, and then snacks and food are about entertainment. And Dubai chocolate didn't go viral because it didn't taste incredible. So there's lots happening here, and I know our speakers today are going to share a little bit about all of these subject areas. So Reed McEachran is part of Ardent Mills, North America's leading flour milling and ingredient company, and they are a joint co-sponsor of this event. So thank you very much for that, Reed and team. And you've done some rigorous investigative work, large-scale quantitative research study, and you're going to be sharing the results of this. And so you've taken this problem quite deeply into the production process, et cetera. And I think it's really wonderful to have you here. So Reed, thank you very much, Reed McEachran, for joining us. I'm not sure if you want to say anything at your introduction before you get started.
Yeah, thank you, Tricia. It's a pleasure to be here. Wanted to first of all thank the Baking Association of Canada for having us. Ardent Mills, key player in that organization, key voice for the industry. Just a little bit about myself. So I'm the international marketing manager with Ardent Mills. Been with the company just over 8 years, and very passionate about food, very passionate about nutrition. In former life, I was a Canadian national team ski athlete, and now I'm a competitive distance runner. So nutrition, performance, diet is very near and dear to my heart, and very near and dear to us at Ardent Mills. So look forward to sharing some great data and having a good discussion today.
And Reed is the one that got up at 5 or 4:30 in the morning before a bakery showcase and got his run in. I have to ask every day what time he got up because it's amazing. And then we also have Derek Litchie, who is the founding engineer and chief data officer at RX Foods. Now, this be an organization you're less familiar with, and I'm going to let Derek explain a little bit about what they do. But over 7 years, they've evolved into being a trusted, clinically validated technology platform, and they basically measure nutrition and track food consumption patterns. So part of today's webinar was about what people say they're doing, and then we've got someone tracking and showing us pictures and monitoring their meal plan to demonstrate what is exactly happening. So I want to say welcome to you, Derek. I know there's been over 1 million meals that you've analyzed in your data here today, and perhaps you might introduce RX Food and explain a little bit how it became part of this process today.
Yeah, thanks very much, Tricia, and also thank you to the Baking Association of Canada for having me here today. I'm looking forward to sharing some insights with you. But as a quick background on RX Food, we evolved out of a clinical trial at the Hospital for Sick Kids that started in 2017, where we could demonstrate that technology could help patients, especially type 1, newly diagnosed type 1 diabetic patients, reduce their glycated hemoglobin, so reduce their HbA1c. And so we were able to show that using technology, we could help measure nutrition and provide insight on carbohydrates to these patients. And so we've taken that result and grown that into various different clinical spaces as well as insurance spaces. And just as Tricia said, we help people measure their food. The medical community has always known that nutrition is important, but it's been very hard to measure and therefore provide feedback and recommendations on that. So that's precisely what RX Food does. We help hospitals and clinics across Canada measure and provide feedback on nutrition just simply by taking a photo of their food.
And so over to you, Reed. We've got some great slides and some great data to share with us.
Excellent. Thank you, Tricia. So yeah, just as a little level set, just to, again, most of you know Ardent Mills, but we always start with this slide, internal, external, every meeting, customer presentation, webinar is our purpose. We're here to be the trusted partner for nourishing the world through nutritious ingredient solutions. And how do we do it? It's our values. It's serving, trust, simplicity, safety. So what we aim to share today is to bring some light to simplicity around this topic. How can we work together as an industry? How can we share the right detail? How can we help consumers where they need to be meeting in their dietary and nutritional goals? So as Tricia mentioned, we've done a large-scale study to look at overall, how do Canadians eat? So what are the dietary preferences? What are the trends that are rising to the top? And so going to walk you through that today. When we did this, one of the biggest things that we realized was 74% of consumers who were studied said that they've changed their dietary or eating behaviors over the last 3 months. So basically everyone, that's 3 in 4 consumers, changing how they're eating. And a couple of key themes really rose to the top in that. Overall, we're looking at better or smarter eating to improve my health and wellness. We're looking at avoiding specific ingredients or cutting specific ingredients because they may be detracting from my health and wellness. And then you're also seeking or adding ingredients. And that's where I think as an industry, we've got a large opportunity, and we can frame this up as an opportunity to help consumers improve their health and wellness. But one of the interesting stats that rose from this too is we saw that when consumers are shopping, they're not just looking for one benefit here, one benefit there. They're on average looking for 8.6 different benefits as they're shopping each individual time. So we like to think of this as benefit stacking. You're looking for the most bang for your buck. You're looking to layer in many different benefits and include them in all of your different meal parts, whether breakfast, snacking, or dinner occasions. And we've seen that growing. We tracked this over the last year or so, and that's grown, double-digit percentage. So what are those types of behaviors that we're looking at in this study? Here, we're going to look at low growth, low participation, bottom left corner, all the way up to high growth, high participation in this top right corner. But the ones that really rose to the top as that highest growing, highest potential are things like plant-based protein, sustainably grown foods, positive nutrition, clean label eating, and then honing in on the bottom right-hand corner, so high participation and low growth, you have very mainstream things like high protein, high fiber, whole grain foods, avoiding ultra processed foods. So there's a lot of different dietary elements and consumer eating behaviors that went into this study. But I think a lot of these, Derek and I are going to touch on today and just shed a little bit of light in, how can the baking industry meet consumers where they are and how can they help them achieve their goals with health and wellness. So bringing us into the GLP-1 study portion of the session. So just, RX Food, Ardent Mills, we're not endorsing, recommending, supporting the use of GLP-1s. We're sharing some data and having a thoughtful conversation about how the industry can partner here to achieve what we're looking for with health and wellness around food. So kind of some of the key takeaways that we want you to think about as we're speaking today are really in the adoption cycle of GLP-1s, awareness is highly strong. You'll see some data behind this shortly, but really it's ubiquitous. You can't go a couple conversations generally in talking about food without this topic coming up. So it's very relevant, very hot, but also consumers have very well increased their awareness over the last about 18 months in this space. And in the food manufacturer space, we're already seeing innovation that's starting to be centered around these GLP-1 eating priorities. So we're seeing cleaner label solutions. We're seeing higher fiber solutions. We're seeing high protein being mixed into the everyday baked goods and products that consumers are eating to really try to meet consumers and help them achieve their goals here. We'll talk through a little bit about this as well, but barriers to taking the medication are falling. We're seeing lower costs. We're seeing more insurance coverage. We're seeing pill formats come out in the US. And there's generally less social stigma around GLP-1s today, kind of indicating too that there's a larger acceptance in our society for it. One of the things that we haven't seen yet is widespread adoption. Hasn't turned the tide at this point, but I think that's coming. There's a lot of reasons that some of these barriers, per se, are going to fall or become a little bit less impactful, and we're going to see a little bit of an increase in this space. So what our study is showing us is that nearly 1 in 20 Canadian adults are using GLP-1s. So that's a very large number. 4.7% of the population equates to roughly 2 million Canadians who are on GLP-1 medications today. So the question is no longer what impact this will have for the industry, it's what will the impact be. And just for a benchmark, when you look at the US participation in GLP-1 space, as we do study that as well, that's at about 8.8% or closer to 1 in 10 adults who are taking GLP-1s. We do know, though, as well, the CTV and CBC did just put out a study where they see this number a little bit closer to 1 in 12. So, in the last number of months since we've done this study, that number is even increasing as some of the news progresses, as some of the barriers fall faster and in real time. So the large takeaway here is that this is a meaningful population size who is using GLP-1s. And so as an industry, there's a lot we can do together to partner here. So when we look at that awareness topic of how aware are Canadians with GLP-1s, there's only 12% today who are actually unaware. So you have an almost ubiquity in awareness of what GLP-1s are and what they do for us humans. As I said, about 4.8% that are currently taking GLP-1s, but there's a big number in our study, as well as in the CBC study, who have said that they plan to start over the next 6 months. So we'll talk about some of the reasons why that might be. But again, we see that growing versus when we did this study last year. So we see that 1 in 20, 1 in 12 is likely going to be growing in the future. Then when you look at those who would never consider, that's going to be about 60%. So, that still leaves 40% of the population that would consider a GLP-1. So that's a very large percentage of our population and is very meaningful statistically. Some of the drivers behind what we've seen as increasing adoption of GLP-1s and the usage of them are in the US, there's now a GLP-1 pill format that's approved and that's being used for weight management stateside. And that could come to Canada in the future, which could help with some of those barriers. We've also seen Health Canada more recently increasing their approvals of various different GLP-1s. In April 28th specifically, Health Canada approved the first generic injection, which is really that molecule around Ozempic, making us the first G7 country to do so. So really, there's a lot of barriers that are coming down, which will likely increase the adoption and increase the usage of GLP-1s in Canada. So then we wanted to look at, well, what are the motivators to taking GLP-1s? What are consumers indicating the reasons that they would like to use a GLP-1 for? So we're honing in on the 16% of the population who said they're either taking or would consider taking GLP-1s here on this data point. But really the biggest things that make them feel comfortable and confident in using them are information about their effectiveness, proven safety and overall impact to health, the ability to help weight management overall, learn those healthy habits, and continue them after stopping medication. Generally, people are looking for a proven track record here. And then as well, you start to see healthcare agrees to provide, costs covered by insurance, official approval for weight and appetite management by federal agency, new formats, positive social environment, and reaction towards taking GLP-1. So there's a lot going on in this space every day that's moving a lot of these drivers or these motivators for GLP-1 adoption and pushing them a little bit forward, showing its effectiveness, showing that there's not side effects, and as well showing that you can do this and potentially receive coverage through private healthcare insurance or eventually potentially government insurance. So then on the flip side, we wanted to look at, now we're looking at 60% of the population who has said they would never consider taking GLP-1s. So what are those key barriers and what are the reasons that someone may have taken a GLP-1 and then moved on or abandoned the behavior? So very much on the flip side, concerns about safety and overall health would be the #1 driver why folks would not consider taking it. There is concerns about side effects. Then there's concerns about the cost, right? We talked about potential for being able to get coverage through private insurance or through healthcare, but not necessarily there yet today. So these do remain expensive options for Canadians. And so more will need to happen for that to get to that wide stream adoption. Some other interesting facts, people, saying that they would have to stay on the medication long term to see its effectiveness, that it's not approved for weight loss purposes. Shots and needles can be considered a very big one. And with that pill format being approved in the US and potentially coming to Canada, that's a big barrier. And so this industry as a pharmaceutical world is making progress against them, making progress against the insurance. So a couple of these barriers that are, maybe a little bit stronger today have potential to fall going forward, which could impact what that adoption number looks like for Canada. So then looking at that 5% of the population in our study who indicated they're currently taking GLP-1 medications, those consumers are showing really intentional eating behaviors around the foods that they're seeking out across their day parts. One of the interesting things is there's a study out there talking about the average Canadian taking a GLP-1 medication is eating 20 to 30% less calories, right? So you have to have intentionality in your behaviors. You have to have intentionality in the foods you're eating to make sure you're hitting your macronutrients and getting the elements in your diet that you need. So the biggest food characteristics that we see is rising to the top, no doubt high fiber. I think the stat here is that 95% of Canadians don't eat enough fiber and are closer to about half the amount of fiber that they need. Well, with those taking a GLP-1 medication, this becomes even more important. And that fiber content, very, very important. High nutrients, very, very closely tied to that. Low in fat, high in animal protein. Snacking foods. Derek's going to talk about some great information relative to snacking and what we're seeing there. But snacking continues to be a way that we see opportunity for the baking industry to meet consumers that are taking GLP-1s, including pulses as an ingredient, right? Pulses have a very strong health and wellness story to them. They've got great nutritional benefits. So including pulses as the ingredients that they're buying. And then just some other interesting ones that didn't quite make that top 8, but including grains as an ingredient. That's very positive for us as a baking industry, right? Because grains still remain a foundational nutritional element to Canadians' diets. So the fact that our GLP-1 consumers are indicating they see that as a strong way to eat for their needs is very positive for us overall. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Derek to talk through some of the data that they're seeing on the RX food side of things.
That's fantastic. Thanks very much, Reed. So Reed's shown us what consumers say they want from the food, and I'll show a little bit more about what they're actually eating, and they don't always quite line up. So RX Food is a clinical nutrition platform. So we have patients photograph their meals, and then we turn that into validated dietitian reviewed dietary data that we use across clinics in North America. So more importantly, we're measuring that behavior. It's not always relying on recall, and the photo logs will actually show us what they're actually eating. And it's the difference that presents an opportunity here. So we have a recall data set, and then we have the photo data set, and the two data sets diverge, and this is where we can add a little bit of color. A survey, represents stated intent, and as we've even seen in our clinical environments, we often see underreporting as well. So because we're using images, we can capture that consumption as well. So the read behind today is that over roughly 1 million meals that we analyzed for this call, we compared GLP-1 users against a general logging population, and it's an observational look at an industry-leading data set. And I'll show you exactly what that looks like, and we'll start with grains. So looking at the grain share, we saw GLP-1 patients logging a smaller grain share, about 16% of items against 19% for a general group. That on its own fits the decline. However, we see the signal in what they're actually choosing. And the grains that are being chosen, we see a 28% increase in the fiber density of those foods. The highest, and this is GLP-1 users, so that's the highest of any group that we measured. So we see this as a deliberate selection, and so they're trading up within that category, looking for a higher fiber and higher fiber density in their foods. And it makes sense for us. We see increased fiber helping support satiety in these patients, and fiber is helping put bread back on the plate in some cases. Now, if we think about the counterweight to that, we're still seeing a lot of refined grain consumption. So 2/3 of the foods that we see with our GLP-1 users is refined. But that holds across both of the groups that we looked at. There's no migration that we're seeing yet to the whole grain category. And so I think that aligns, reasonably well with what Reed talked about. So we see that as a bit of an opportunity here. The demand for fiber is established, and maybe the whole grain habit is just not quite there yet. Breads, rolls, loaves, bagels, and wraps are still a core of what's being logged by our populations. And so there's a look at the reformulation possibly in this category. Looking more into the baked goods now, the composition is shifting a little bit. So we see here our general loggers there in the aqua color, and GLP-1 in the yellow. Bread and rolls fall about to 13 points from 54 to 41% of baked items. Wraps and loaves absorb most of that, and then cookies and crackers are also ticking up a little bit with the GLP-1 users. We see this as smaller capacity and more deliberate diet choices. We also, and I'll talk a little bit about snacking as well. But the reward behavior sort of still holds. People are treating themselves, but they're treating themselves with smaller portions and slightly different formats. So they're maybe eating more cookies, but the cookies are smaller. Now, looking back to the baked goods and talking about snacking, the baked goods do seem to be migrating into that snacking slot. So 16% against 12 for the general group, with lunch and dinner easing back a little bit. So again, we see those GLP-1 users spreading out a little bit more throughout the day and adding a little bit more into the snacking category. So GLP-1s, we know they suppress appetite, the meals shrink, and then that intake is redistributing into smaller and more frequent eating. And there could be a nausea component there, is what we see. We're doing a little bit more validation on that, but that is a possibility here as well. So so for this category, point squarely at portion controlled fiber and protein forward snack are what our GLP-1 users are interested in. Talking a little bit more about protein, it's not just the protein, it's also the amount and it's the timing. We do see density, protein density is up about 20% per 2,000 calories for our GLP-1 users. The distribution is a little bit different as well. So it's spreading out into that snack category as well. We do see even some more higher sodium snacks as well being consumed in the GLP-1 category. So they're looking for that, small bites here and there outside of the normal meal times. We do know they do often get clinical advice to spread protein consumption out during the day and try and get a regular intake of protein and not all at one meal. And that does align here with what we are seeing in our data. So it's the priority in the clinic on GLP-1s is preserving that muscle, and so the guidance is given to help with that. So the log shows that patients are doing that, and if we look at the distribution over the absolute grams, the totals are reflected across the log meals that we have in our patient population. So just to close my comments here, so we've heard a little bit about decline, and when we look at the food logs, what we're actually seeing is we're seeing denser grains, we're seeing more fiber, smaller and more deliberate treats, a little bit more snacking, and protein spread throughout the day. So the demand's not necessarily disappearing, it's reformulating itself. Major takeaway is that fiber does seem to be a lever. Whole grain is not, we're not seeing a shift there yet, but that's an open gap, and bread is still sort of a leading category. So with that, I'll pass it back over to Reid for his comments.
Yeah, thank you, Derek. I think that's really insightful information for everyone to see. And one of the things that stood out to me there is that snacking is on the rise, but the amount of protein per serving in snacking with GLP-1 users is lower. So it indicates a potential opportunity for us as an industry to create some health by stealth in the snacking space and help increase that protein, increase that fiber in that snacking universe to be able to help these GLP-1 users achieve their goals. So overall, the way we wanted to close this out is that I think this is the right way to frame this opportunity as an industry is to figure out the right way to capitalize on the opportunity. So our recommendation is to look at the insights, leverage the insights, what the data is sharing to us, and then to start to find ways to create products that appeal to consumers that are using GLP-1s. Start to support product ingredient claims that help create clarity around the nutritional benefits that your products and your goods are offering. So a couple of the ways that we really see pulses in the grain industry overall playing a big role in the GLP-1 dietary space is to find new ingredients to bring into everyday baked goods, right? Not necessarily replacing wheat flours, but how can you incorporate things like chickpeas, things like chickpea flour, which have a much higher protein per 100 grams than wheat flour would, right? To help get that health by stealth element into the everyday products that consumers are enjoying. Because as Derek talked about, rewarding and treating is absolutely a behavior that's still present in GLP-1 loggers. And so we see that as a great way to help incorporate some of that health, some of that nutrition into these baked goods. Looking at that lever of fiber, there's a lot of great solutions out there in the whole grain. So one of the products that Ardent Mills offers is a 100% white whole wheat flour. And so a really interesting way to create that sensory, that flavor, and that texture experience that you're looking for with those refined grains, but in something that is whole wheat to help you get that fiber, help you get that protein. And again, ancient and heirloom grains such as sorghum can be a really nice contributor here because they add that positive nutritional element, but they're a very clean, very balanced item to include. As well, barley. We have a sestagrain barley or a high fiber barley that can help in that weight management space, support satiety, support gut microbes to really help these products help get that consumer where they're looking to be. So overall, The question here is no longer if these GLP-1 medications have an impact, it's really how much. But as we said, this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to help kind of refine, help bring some new types of baked goods, smaller portions, more prevalent education around the nutrition in baked goods, and then some unique solutions, right, that incorporate ancient grains, incorporate pulses. And Canadians overall are learning more and more about the benefits that pulses can play in the food system, but they don't have all the pieces to the story yet. So lean on the supplier partners, lean on the data to help tell that story and help that fill your innovation pipeline for products you're bringing to market. So kind of our 4 key calls to action here are continue to track and monitor, reach out to the Bakery Association, reach out to Derek or myself, and help learn and stay educated about some of those adoption triggers and where we see our data coming in. Proactively help support consumers, educate around that fiber, educate around that protein story, and leverage the food science, right? There's a lot of solutions that exist for this today that with some tweaks to formula, some tweaks to process can be really great opportunities to help get baked goods that have that higher nutritional element and help GLP-1 consumers. And at the end of the day, we are all food consumers, tying them back to priorities, but tying it back to great taste, great texture, and great sensory attributes are going to be the keys here to winning in this space. So encourage everyone to continue to look at their innovation pipelines, continue to look at their suppliers and work as a team to really help bring new innovative solutions to market.
That was amazing. Wow. Thank you. I saw a couple of things. I'm still surprised at, call it whole grain breads versus white, that there's still sort of a dominance going, people still prefer that, although I'm beginning to see some of the brands like our Cobb's brand where they have high fiber white buns, et cetera, kind of addressing this. But I think what I've taken away from this session is that it's not a crisis for bakers, but it's an attention thing that we have to consider here. And there are some signals, and we've got a little bit of a roadmap here. And if what the US market is doing is any indication of what's going to happen in Canada in terms of increasing usage of these things with medical coverage, lower costs, and not having to use a needle, a lot of things are maybe going to shift. So, Reid, I'm looking forward to this a year from now if you're going to be tracking, sort of what's going on. So we have a few questions here, a strong lineup of them. I'm going to start with you, Reid. Your data shows significant volume declines in sweet baked goods among GLP users. For many of our members, these products are their highest margin. So this is something you'd probably face. Coming from the baking industry, what's your honest advice on how to think about protecting those margins in those kinds of categories? It's one thing to talk about sliced bread or a roll or a bun, but it's sort of people do go into bakeries for all the stuff that's on the wall behind my. So how do you manage that discussion with somebody in the bakery business?
I think the big takeaway here is that we saw rewarding and treating is absolutely still a behavior that exists in the GLP-1 space. I think many of us have seen that, but finding new ways to create appeal in those ingredients and in those baked goods can be the key here, right? Like I was talking about incorporating something like a chickpea flour, incorporating something like sorghum that creates a new level of interest, a new level of appeal, can really draw in consumers. And to your point, Trisha, it's not only the consumer taking the GLP-1, it's the group they're with. It's the veto vote that you're looking to really make sure you capitalize on. So having that draw, having that hook, having that differentiator in your bakery, in your food manufacturing facility can be a really nice way to help attract consumers to your business because you offer them something that they can't find elsewhere. So I think keeping that rewarding and treating and those sweet baked goods are still going to be a foundational part of Canadians' diets and our way of life, but incorporating new ways to make them fun, make them healthy, and give them a little bit of a health aura to them.
Health aura, I like that one. Now, Derek, we know that generic GLP-1 medications are expected to reach the Canadian market in June 2026. I think you can buy it now at Shoppers. What do you think the time is 2027? Are we looking at your data? Is it going to look significantly different for the bakeries, snack foods, et cetera? Or is this just kind of a slow evolving thing that we expect to see?
Yeah, when I think about what we're seeing in our data now, because we do look at the density, and so we would expect that trend to consider. So again, doubling down on those snacking choices and looking for those alternates, but then also still maintaining that demand for increased fiber content, and the satiety. So they're meeting their snacking needs, but they're also not overeating and spreading that out throughout the day. And so we expect that trend will likely continue and probably grow within our user base.
And I can add to this as well. Today I did a post around sugar. It seems like GLP-1 users have moved away from artificial sweeteners and back to sugar because of that whole looking at what they're eating, and it should be natural ingredients and clean, et cetera. And sugar's viewed by them as a clean ingredient. So that fear of baked goods and not being sweet enough or having the sensory delivery seems to be something that's also going to be impacting this. Now, Reed, if I was a small, mid-sized Canadian bakery, I don't have an R&D budget. Where do I start? Is there a concrete step? Is this the kind of thing that you chat with people about at Ardent Mills?
Yeah, I'd say a great spot to start if you don't have the R&D team or don't have the time and energy to put towards it is look to your supplier partners for their expertise, lean on their insights, lean on their resources, make the ask, see what's available to you in partnering with them. Because if I put myself in our Ardent Mills shoes, our R&D teams are examining these ingredients, how they the types of hydration they hold, how they perform, how they work through a functionality perspective and have a lot of expertise there. So look to us for that expertise, that guidance. I'm sure many supplier partners are very happy to do so and help you in getting those first one or two starts in your innovation cycle to help you learn, hey, what types of ingredients should I consider for sweet baked goods around incorporating them in? What types of ingredients should I include for breads, rolls, tortillas, wraps, as Derek alluded, that we're staying strong. So I think look to your supplier partners and look to the industry as a whole. We can do a great job collaborating together to get these products to market.
So do you have one that you've tasted in the lab that you thought was pretty awesome?
I think there's some really interesting sensory work and some interesting technologies out there. One of the ones that I would talk about, Trisha, would be roasted chickpea flour. So chickpeas that are actually roasted before they're milled, and it gives them a very clean, balanced, almost a sweeter flavor profile. So you've got a really strong nutritional element in your chickpea, but you've just solved one of the larger issues for it without adding other ingredients in making it taste great. So I think that's a really neat way that we can get really good tasting baked goods on Canadians' plates and in their mouths, but not sacrificing in that taste and texture element. I think that's paramount still.
Pretty cool. Derek, GLP-1 users are eating less and more, I guess, intentionally has come up in this webinar. Do you think that there's a premiumization opportunity here? I mean, make it smaller, make it more fortified, charge a bit more. Is this the opportunity? Or do you think there's going to be some price sensitivity to this?
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing, obviously, we're seeing the frequency comes down a little bit, but then there's still intention there and still an intent for snacking. So our view is that there's a premiumization option where you can have a slightly smaller snack with more premium ingredients, and so maintaining a cost neutral approach, and the demand is still there. People still want to have those little snacks and the rewards for that, and so we think there's going to be strong demand for those small high fiber buns. And there's those genuine treats that will give them 5 grams of fiber in one sitting. So lots of options there, I think, for premium foods.
Cool, that's great. Now, Reed, the fortified flour innovations you've described from Ardent Mills are exciting, but taste and texture is everything in baking. How close are these reformulated products to the consumer experience that are they saying, well, I'll agree that it's not going to be as good, or can you, from your experience and what you've seen so far, can that delivery be there and it can be pretty much on parity to what they're currently eating, but getting a bit
Yeah.
more bang for the buck?
So I think starting with the consumer, consumers through our data are telling us, we want the health, we want the wellness, but we're not willing to compromise on that taste, that texture, and that overall eating experience, right? We shouldn't feel that we have to overhaul or redesign our taste palette to be able to achieve the goals we have. So I think from the flour perspective, getting these functional ingredients, there is a lot of really nice ways to help incorporate them into baked goods that are, as I mentioned, you can incorporate at 50%, at 60%. So you still have the foundational base of wheat flour that's in your formula, in your recipe today, but you're incorporating a percentage so that you can leverage the food science, leverage that expertise of wheat, but you're also increasing the nutritional elements, and you get a nice balance of maintaining that consumer experience from your product and what your brand standards are. But you've also been able to bump up, by 3-4 grams of protein or fiber, depending on what your targets are, to be able to have something that does help with that health and wellness.
And then Derek, you've been monitoring 7 years in the biography of what's going on at RX Foods. Was GLP-1 slow to come into the diet plans and what people were keeping track of? And has there been sort of a big explosion in 2026 or 2025, or it's just been a steady, consistent growth?
We've started to see a lot more in the last year or so, especially as it became a little bit more mainstream. Obviously, we heard a lot about them in the news. We do a lot of work also with contrave users. So we do have other users of similar drugs, or drugs that have a similar effect, and so we've seen an uptick in across all the board. But we're expecting that to accelerate. It's really started to take off now with the generic situation in Canada, and we expect that to continue to rise over the next few years.
And to our audience, I just put it out there. Any other further questions? Martin, did you have anything you wanted to add at the end here as I close off and thank our guest speakers?
Perfect. Yes, what an interesting presentation. Thank you very much, Derek and Reed. I'm going to be taking a few hours to process all this new information. Thank you everyone for attending and supporting Baking Association webinars. If you need any more information about the BAC, please do not hesitate to contact myself or Tricia. We look forward to the next one.
So we will be sending up a follow-up email to everyone. Thank you for those that attended. And Reed and Derek, thank you very much for the time you invested in this with me to get this all together. We will be announcing our Proofpoint webinar series back in the fall. We'll take the summer off, and everyone can happily bake and not attend at 4 p.m. Until then, keep baking, keep innovating, and we'll keep providing information about subject material just like this. So thank everyone and have a wonderful evening.
Now, Tricia, there was just
Oh, yeah.
two more questions on Q&A that
Oh, okay, I
that
didn't,
were open
mine
there.
was blank here. Let me see.
I see one from Maria Tuchman. If you were
Okay.
sitting on the executive team of a mid-sized
There
food
you go.
manufacturer today, what conversation would you insist on that happens now rather than 3 years?
Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would probably looking at the product list and seeing which ones are exposed. What are the other higher fiber, higher protein versions that could be available in those types of products? So that could be something, this quarter, we're already seeing a shift to those foods. So we'd be probably thinking about that. People aren't quitting the category necessarily, but they are looking for those other options. So I'd probably get ahead of that instead of waiting for changes in sales.
And was there one more question that you saw there, Derek?
Yeah, there was one for Reed. How has Ardent done R&D, and how do you have any recipes that we can pass on to bakeries?
Yeah, I can happily respond to that one. So Sherry, thank you for the question. Absolutely. So our R&D teams have done some work in this space, and I think with the ingredients that we have to offer, we've got a number of recipes, a number of solutions that can help you have a starting point. And like I said, help with that second step of figuring out what ingredients are going to be right for me and how will they fit into my current product offerings. So I can absolutely follow up with you and share some of those out. But again, it goes back to my comment is lean on your supplier partners. We're here to help you. We're here to help you innovate. We want you to succeed in this space. So that's my kind of key call out is that, I'll send those through but anyone else, please do reach out as well. We're happy to share those.
And thank you, Derek. You've added in the chat. If someone want to try the RX Food app, there's information there. And if someone wanted to reach out to you, Derek, how would they reach you?
I'll put my email in the chat as well. I'm happy to
Great.
hear from anybody and answer any questions.
And Reed's is at the bottom of the presentation. And if all else fails, tryan@baking.ca and I can connect you. So thank you again, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful evening.